Hey guys, today I bring you an impressive and transformative story that will move you. It is the true story of a woman who was clinically dead for more than 10 minutes and, in that time, had a powerful vision about the future of humanity, including revelations about the return of Christ and a great global deception that is already underway. Before we start, comment below which city you are watching from and, of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this. Now, prepare your heart, because this story will change your view on everything. My name is Celestine Hawk. I'm a nurse in Atlanta, Georgia, and my routine has always been marked by the same silent cadence, day after day. At Midtown Hospital, where I work, time seems to oscillate between despair and hope. But for me, it was just the backdrop of a life I believed was already written. I always viewed faith as a discreet companion, something that existed within me, but that rarely gained the spotlight in my daily choices. I remember one rainy fall morning as I walked through the cold, fluorescent-lit hallways of the hospital. The rain drummed outside, as if the sky was also crying for something inexplicable. I was on my way to the break room when I heard the soft voice of Michael Lawson, a colleague who always seemed to carry more than the challenges of the shift in his eyes. "Celestine, you seem thoughtful today. Does something bother you?" he asked, with genuine concern on his face. I responded with a shy smile, trying to hide the uneasiness that was growing inside me. "Maybe it's just the weight of routine, Michael. Sometimes I feel like we're all stuck in an endless cycle where faith becomes something automatic without the depth it should have," I confessed as my footsteps echoed down the hallway. Even in that brief conversation, I could feel something inside me beginning to stir. Although I have never been one to seek spiritual depth, lately, an inner voice kept reminding me that there was something more to be discovered. Maybe it was the sound of rain or the whisper of winds that crept through the cracks in the hospital's old windows, but suddenly every little thing seemed to have a hidden meaning. During breaks, while reviewing charts or adjusting medical equipment, I found myself rambling. My gaze was lost outside the window, watching the trees sway in the wind, and I asked myself, is there something beyond this everyday life? Shouldn't our faith be more than a simple formality? These questions echoed in my mind, but like a soft melody that insists on repeating itself, I left them aside, thinking that, perhaps, it was just tiredness from another shift. My prayers, said quickly before each shift, were no longer the long dialogues with the divine that my mother used to encourage me to have when I was little. They were more like rituals, done out of habit, without that true feeling of connection. And so, faith remained in the background, while the world around me followed its frenetic pace, indifferent to the concerns of a soul that yearned for something greater. It was in this context of routine and silent questioning that my life began to take an unexpected path. Without knowing it, every beat of my heart and every breath carried the seed of a transformation that was about to explode into my existence. And, although at that moment I couldn't imagine what fate had in store, a feeling that something important was about to happen was already present, like a subtle and inescapable promise. Before the storm that would change my life, my days unfolded in an almost mechanical rhythm, where routine was the only conductor of a silent and, at times, numbing symphony. Each morning, the alarm woke me up at 5:30 a.m. and, while the city of Atlanta was still sprawling among dreams, I was getting ready for another shift at Midtown Hospital. Walking through the damp, dimly lit streets, I wondered if this endless cycle was somehow a harbinger of what was to come. At the hospital, the cold corridors and the incessant sounds of machines and hurried footsteps created an environment that, at first glance, was pure routine. However, something more subtle was present. During the intervals between long hours of care, I felt an inexplicable discomfort, as if an unknown energy whispered secrets in the silence of my rapid prayers. In these moments, I found myself lost in thought, remembering teachings from my childhood and questioning whether the faith I practiced was as deep as it needed to be to face the challenges that were silently accumulating. Once, during a coffee break, Michael Lawson approached with his always discerning gaze. "Celestine, you seem more distant than usual today. Everything is fine?" he asked, with a concern that contrasted with the indifference of the surrounding environment. "I don't know, Michael. I feel like something is wrong, but I can't put my finger on it. Maybe it's the weight of everyday life, or maybe something bigger, I replied, with a trembling voice that denoted an internal restlessness. That afternoon, as I reviewed reports and charts, the feeling of agitation intensified. Each strike of the clock seemed to mark not only the passing of time, but also the sound of an alert echoing inside me. I remembered the prayers that, for years, I had said automatically, without the fervor and intensity that now seemed necessary to me. I longed for a truer connection, for a sincere dialogue with the divine that I had somehow always felt distant. The unrest was not just limited to the professional environment. Upon returning home, the city seemed to carry a dense atmosphere, as if the streets were permeated with an invisible omen. As I drove down the avenues of Atlanta, the nightlights reflected in my mind fragmented scenes of an uncertain future. On one of these nights, we stopped at a traffic light and, for a brief moment, the silence inside the car was broken by the soft voice of an elderly woman who, accidentally, commented, "My daughter, the wind today is full of changes." "It's true, ma'am," I replied, not knowing if that was just a coincidence or a sign. These small, seemingly ordinary moments began to add up and form a mosaic of omens. Every sigh, every unspoken word, seemed to announce that the calm I knew was about to be shaken by greater forces. And even as the routine ran its course, I felt that, somehow, something was gathering in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to emerge. As the days passed, the feeling of being on the brink of irreversible change grew, like a silent storm gathering on the horizon. And although I tried to ignore or rationalize these feelings, they persisted, like a constant reminder that something profound and transformative was about to happen. After a shift that seemed endless, the night in Atlanta became denser and full of shadows. I left Midtown Hospital with exhaustion etched into every muscle and with the hope that the early morning darkness would only bring rest. However, upon entering the deserted streets, the environment transformed into a threatening scenario where every sound seemed to portend imminent danger. He walked quickly, his scattered thoughts mixed with the biting cold of the night. It was then that, without warning, a group of individuals emerged from the shadows. Their faces were hidden by hoods and makeshift masks, but the anger emanating from their gazes was unmistakable. Before I could scream, I felt strong hands grabbing me by the arms and a sudden slap across the face, which made me momentarily lose my balance. "Hey, look who we have here!" shouted one of the attackers, his hoarse voice resonating through the narrow alley. "What do you want?" I managed to let go, trying to catch my breath and free myself from the grip. But the answer came in the form of violent gestures, as if they wanted to get something out of me that not even I understood. I remember one of the attackers approaching with a look of fury and despair, his face distorted by accumulated anger. "You represent everything that is wrong with this world," he shouted, while delivering a new blow. The impact caused my body to buckle, and the ground seemed to come closer to swallow me. My heart beat wildly, and every second seemed to stretch into an eternity of pain and disbelief. As I tried to free myself, I heard the muffled screams of my own survival instincts. The violence that befell me was unusual. It was charged with an intensity that seemed to transcend the mere physical act. Every blow, every punch, carried a charge of hatred that, in some way, reflected an inner darkness far greater than simple human brutality. "Stop! You don't know who you're dealing with!" I shouted, trying to appeal to any spark of reason that might exist within them. But my words were lost in the tumult of screams and the noise of blows that resounded on the sidewalk. The night, previously silent, was now filled with chaos that echoed through the almost empty streets. As the attackers continued to attack me, my strength seemed to evaporate. In a brief moment, I realized that the physical pain was beginning to give way to a strange feeling of detachment, as if my body was detaching itself from the dark environment that surrounded me. Amid the whirlwind, one of the attackers stopped for a moment, as if a doubt had crossed his mind. "You have nothing, so why attack us?" he muttered, confused, before being interrupted by someone else who was already losing his patience and insisting even more violently. I, groping my conscience, could barely formulate an answer. The world around me became a blur of distorted faces and muffled sounds. Each impact resonated like a hammering of inevitable fate. In that instant, The pain, which had previously been overwhelming, began to be replaced by an inexplicable stillness, as if something beyond the physical world was approaching. I can't tell if it was desperation or a silent preparation for what would come next, but I felt that, even in the darkness of violence, a new reality was opening up before me. As the blows followed one another with an almost inhuman fury, a strange sensation began to creep in amid the searing pain. I, Celestine Hawke, felt as if each impact not only ripped apart my body, but also slowly removed the shackles of reality. It was in an instant when the world, with its cacophony of screams and punches, began to fade away and transform into a silent and indefinite immensity. I vividly remember the moment when, after a particularly violent blow, my body seemed to betray all its strength. The pain, which once pulsed like a raging tide, was replaced by an almost surreal calm. For a brief second, I heard a voice, or was it just a whisper from my own heart, saying, "Celestine, breathe, let go." There was no time for answers. The world around me began to dissipate, like ink spreading through water, until everything was reduced to serene darkness. At that exact moment, my body stopped. Yes, the doctors struggling to revive me would later confirm that I had been clinically dead for 10 minutes and 25 seconds. As my lungs ceased their effort to breathe and my heart beat, or rather stopped beating, a feeling of peace flooded my consciousness. The pain, which until then had been a constant companion, had turned into a distant echo, as if hearing a whisper from another life. On the threshold between existence and nothingness, I felt my mind float, detaching itself from physical reality. There were no chains that limited my perception. Instead, there was complete freedom. In the midst of this state of expanded consciousness, I began to notice subtle details, colors, sounds, and sensations that I had never seen before. It was as if I was being transported to a dimension where time and space no longer had any relevance. Within this whirlwind of sensations, I remembered the voice that had guided me to breathe. I then decided to talk to her, even though I knew it could just be a reflection of my mind in a trance. "Who are you?" I questioned, almost like a whisper. The answer came not in the form of words, but in the overwhelming feeling that I was loved and accepted. The calm that enveloped me was immeasurable, as if a part of me finally understood the meaning of forgiveness and redemption. As I floated in this vacuum of serenity, I began to relive scenes from my life, moments of joy, sadness, and even moments of loneliness that I had never dared to face. Each memory gained a new color, a new shape, as if time was reorganizing itself to show the true value of each moment lived. I felt like I was facing a crossroads where past choices were intertwined with future possibilities. The transition was so sudden that, in the blink of an eye, I realized that my consciousness was no longer confined to the body I once knew. The line between life and death became blurred, and for a brief period, I was able to observe my own existence with a non-judgmental gaze. I was no longer that nurse burdened by everyday pressures. Now, I was something more, a spark of an eternal light, which refuses to be limited by the barriers of the physical. In that moment of complete surrender, I understood that, even at the height of suffering, there was a greater truth. The silence of death allowed me to see the beauty hidden in the chaos, and although the journey was brief, it left an indelible mark on my soul. At the exact moment that darkness threatened to envelop me completely, something extraordinary began to happen. I, Celestine Hawke, felt an indescribable shiver, not of fear, but of an almost palpable expectation. Little by little, as if the veil of reality was falling apart, a light began to emerge from nowhere. It was a luminosity that not only illuminated the space around me, but seemed to penetrate every corner of my soul, dissolving the shadows that had obscured it for so long. The light was not blinding or harsh. On the contrary, it was soft and enveloping, like a hug from someone you haven't seen in a long time, but which brings a feeling of safety and welcome. Amidst the silence that took over everything, I heard a delicate, almost imperceptible melody that accompanied the emergence of this divine glow. The sensation was of being pulled into a universe where pain and suffering no longer existed, where every particle vibrated with an energy of love and compassion. As I floated on this new plane, my senses were heightened in unimaginable ways. Each color gained depth, each sound had a natural harmony, and even the smell of the air seemed filled with fragrances that recalled a heavenly garden. I felt like I was being invited to explore a place where time didn't pass, where the past, present, and future merged into a single peaceful reality. "Who's there?" I asked, with a voice that echoed in a space where words seemed to have a different weight, filled with reverence. The answer came not as an audible voice, but as a sensation that spread throughout my being, as if the light itself wanted to communicate something beyond words. I felt a comforting warmth that passed through my chest, and in that instant, I understood that I was facing something greater, something that transcended human understanding. I remember closing my eyes to better absorb that moment. When I opened them again, the luminosity intensified, revealing details I had never seen before, sparkling particles that danced in perfect synchronization, as if telling ancient stories of redemption and rebirth. There was an indescribable clarity, a certainty that every pain, every tear, had prepared the way for that encounter with the true essence of life. In that environment of pure energy, I realized that light was not just a visual manifestation, but a living presence that spoke directly to my soul. It was as if each beam carried the message that, even in the thickest darkness, there is always a spark of hope ready to ignite. The revelation that the true essence of existence lies in unconditional love and acceptance settled within me with the force of silent thunder. During these moments, I let the light completely surround me, allowing me to absorb every detail, every nuance of that universe that seemed to exist parallel to the world we knew. I felt the gratitude of a soul that, even in the face of the end, finds a new beginning. And, in the midst of this immensity of sensations, I knew that something inside me had changed forever, a transformation that I could never forget. At that moment when the light became more intense, I felt my soul open in an unusual way, almost as if every fiber of my being was prepared to receive something extraordinary. Still immersed in the feeling of peace and plenitude that the luminosity provided, a soft and deep voice began to echo around me, filling the space with a cadence that seemed to be singing an ancient song. "Celestine, my daughter, I am here," said the voice, so comforting that each word seemed to caress my soul. Upon hearing those words, my eyes widened as I searched for the source of that divine sound. Slowly, the figure that formed before me gained contours and details. There was something indescribably serene in that countenance, a presence that emanated an unconditional love, a compassion that seemed capable of forgiving all my faults. It was Jesus Christ. The figure was enveloped in an aura of light that softened every line of his face, revealing eyes that brimmed with wisdom and tenderness. For a moment, the world around us dissipated, and all that existed was the inexplicable connection between him and me. Amid the vastness of that transcendent space, I felt as if every emotional wound and every physical scar began to heal, surrounded by a feeling of acceptance that I had never experienced. "Come, Celestine," he invited me, with a voice that mixed authority and sweetness, as if he already knew all the secrets of my soul. I slowly advanced towards him, each step guided by an unshakable confidence that welled up from the depths of my being. As I approached, I could notice the soft glow of his gaze, which reflected not only the light of the environment, but also the promise of redemption. There was no need for physical touch. The simple fact of his presence warmed my heart and dispelled all the anguish I carried. As we walked together through that space that seemed suspended between time and infinity, he began to speak, revealing truths that I had never dared to imagine. "You were chosen to see beyond the shadows, to recognize the beauty that lies even in the darkest moments. Your sufferings, your doubts and fears, they were all part of a greater plan. You, Celestine, have a mission to be a beacon for those lost in the darkness." His words were simple, but they carried immense weight. Each sentence seemed to resonate with the truth I had long sought but had never been able to reach. He looked at me with an intensity that made me feel completely known, as if all my anguish and imperfections were displayed under the light of his loving gaze. "I know the pain you faced, the moments you felt helpless. But remember, in every tear, there is the seed of a new beginning. His words intertwined with the melody of that sacred place, and I felt flooded with a sense of forgiveness and renewal. For a few precious moments, we were immersed in that silent dialogue, where each exchange of glances and each transmitted word filled a void that I had never known existed. The feeling of being loved unconditionally, without judgment or reservations, transformed my perspective on myself and the world around me. When I felt that time, in that realm of pure spirituality, was diluted into something eternal, Jesus gently instructed me to carry that experience into my life. He taught me that true power lies in recognizing one's own fragility and yet finding the strength to continue, illuminating the path of others with the love that he himself emanated. Amidst that state of expanded consciousness, while still in divine company, my mind began to unveil visions that defied common understanding. The boundaries of time dissolved, and I began to see events that stretched from past to future, all intertwined by an invisible thread of fate and deception. Before me, the scenery transformed into a tapestry of vivid images. In one sequence, I saw the world plunged into increasing darkness. This darkness was not simply the absence of light, but a palpable shadow, which swallowed hopes and erased the truth. In the midst of this gloom, a charismatic figure emerged. His countenance was charming, his voice soft and persuasive, capable of attracting crowds with promises of redemption and unity. However, there was an unsettling air about his presence, as if behind the brightness of his eyes lurked a sinister intent. "Celestine, watch carefully," Jesus whispered, pointing to the unfolding scene. The vision showed crowds gathered in squares, streets and avenues in several cities, all mesmerized by speeches that mixed truth with deception. A collective murmur rose, and as I watched, I realized that many were deceived by signs and wonders that actually concealed the manipulation of their minds. Next to this figure, another being appeared, a false prophet who displayed miraculous signs. His acts were spectacular, and his miracles, although impressive, seemed to be mere tricks to cover up a corrupt truth. He promises miracles, but what he offers is a veil that covers reality, murmured a voice that echoed in the immensity of the vision as if it were part of the whisper of the universe itself. As the image intensified, I could see how this new order was infiltrating all spheres of life: governments, educational institutions, the media, and even churches. The revelation was frightening. Technology, which in other times had been a symbol of progress, now emerged as a tool of control, monitoring and restricting the movements of those who dared to question the status quo. This global system, driven by fear and manipulation, seemed determined to subjugate the true essence of freedom. "The truth is always hidden behind deceptive appearances," Jesus stated firmly, his voice resounding like a clarion amid the storm of illusions. As these words echoed, I visualized small groups of believers, small points of light that resisted in the gloom, united by true faith and the commitment to preserving the authenticity of spirituality. They were resilient communities, which, even in the face of oppression and persecution, kept the flame of truth burning. These groups, although a minority, represented the opposite of that army of deception that threatened humanity. The vision continued and revealed the imminence of a final battle, a confluence of spiritual and human forces. I saw armies gathering, both of angels and people committed to the truth, ready to face an inevitable fate. Jesus, with an authority that only divinity can convey, spoke, "There will be a battle where good and evil will face each other irrevocably. I will return as the warrior king to defeat the Antichrist and the false prophet, casting them into the lake of fire, where their lies will be extinguished forever." This intense and overwhelming revelation was not made to sow fear, but to alert and prepare faithful hearts. The message was clear. Deception, veiled in sweet words and impressive signs, would be the enemy's greatest weapon. However, spiritual discernment, combined with intimate knowledge of the truth, would be the armor against this darkness. Every image, every word of this vision immortalized in me the urgency to live with a deep and unshakable faith. The understanding that the true church would be one that remained faithful, even under pressure, and that the light of truth would triumph over deception took hold, leaving me with the responsibility of preparing not only myself, but also being a beacon for others. As the vision slowly dissipated, I felt something new was coming into that space, filled with mystery and revelation. The atmosphere, previously full of images and omens, now seemed more concentrated, as if the universe had reserved a singular moment to address me with a personal message. The presence of Jesus, who had just revealed himself with all his tenderness and authority, seemed to intensify, taking on a clearer and more inviting form. "Celestine, listen to me carefully," said Jesus, his voice now firmer, but still filled with a sweetness that warmed my soul. His words echoed so clearly that, even in the immensity of that spiritual realm, each syllable stuck in my heart. I, still absorbed in that state of enchantment and reverence, replied in a trembling voice, but full of hope, "Yes, sir, I'm here to listen." He began to outline, in profound detail, what would happen in the times to come. His instructions went beyond ordinary words. They were true commandments for the soul, guidelines that should guide not only my life, but that of those who still sought the light. "There is an urgency in the times," he explained, as a wave of energy seemed to sweep through the entire environment. "The enemy uses deception as his most powerful weapon, hiding the truth behind seductive lies. It is vital that those who remain in faith strengthen themselves in their knowledge of the Word, cultivate a life of constant prayer, and develop practical skills that prepare them for the challenges to come." As he spoke, I could see in stunning detail the duality of the future. On the one hand, the spread of a world order based on technological control and manipulation. On the other, the resistance of the faithful, who, even under persecution, would unite in communities of mutual support. "You must be a beacon to those in darkness," Jesus continued, approaching me so intimately that I could feel the comforting warmth of his presence. "The mission entrusted to you is not one of proselytism, but of witness. Live your truth, show the way to sincere communion with God, and teach others to discern the signs that the enemy places in their path." His voice was almost a whisper, but each word carried an unparalleled weight. "Know that true strength is not in the absence of weakness, but in the ability to recognize and overcome each challenge with love and resilience." The words seemed to vibrate in the air, as if they formed a protective shield around my soul. I absorbed each instruction, each detail, trying to internalize that divine message that revealed itself amidst the complexity of the visions. As Jesus outlined the paths to be taken, I felt overwhelmed by a mixture of responsibility and serenity. "Remember, Celestine," he concluded firmly and tenderly, "spiritual discernment is the key to resisting the enemy's deceptions. Keep your faith deep, study the Bible with dedication, and cultivate prayer as a powerful weapon. Do not allow the storms of this world to shake the conviction that resides in your heart." The feeling was of having received a sacred legacy, a mission that, although silent, would resonate through time. With each divine word, I felt the inner transformation consolidate, preparing me for the difficult journey that was yet to come. The call was clear and urgent, and even though the experience was intense and at times overwhelming, an indescribable peace settled within me, like the certainty that with God's grace, all adversities could be overcome. In the blink of an eye, the feeling of completeness and peace that I had experienced on the threshold of death began to dissipate, giving way to an indescribable urgency and restlessness. Suddenly, everything around me seemed to compress into a vortex of light and sound, and, as if awakening from a deep dream, I felt my consciousness return to my body. It was as if an invisible thread pulled me back to reality, where the hospital environment, with its monitors and equipment, reopened my existence. Minutes later, doctors gathered around me. Their faces showed a mixture of relief, amazement, and, for some, an inexplicable reverence. I remember hearing Nurse Evelyn Parker muttering, as she adjusted the monitors, "She's back, without any brain damage. It's a miracle." I, still involved in the mist of memories that were intertwined with reality, only managed a slight smile, unable to put into words what I had experienced. As the medical team checked vital signs and adjusted machines, Michael Lawson approached discreetly, gently holding my hand. "Celestine, you were very far away." As if you had touched the ends of the universe, he said, his voice choked with emotion. I tried to respond, but words seemed insufficient to express the transformation that was happening to me. Within me, the transcendent experience had already left its indelible mark, and every cell of my being pulsed with new energy. In the days that followed, something inexplicable took hold of me. The physical scars that had resulted from the brutal attack gradually disappeared. But more than that, something even deeper was established, an internal change that transformed me from the inside out. Every time I crossed the corridors of Midtown Hospital, I no longer saw faces with expressions of tiredness or resignation, but rather souls carrying their own battles. And, even though I continued with the same routine, the way I perceived each moment had changed radically. In conversations with Daniel Marshall, the spiritual mentor who had advised me so many times, I began to expose a new perspective. Daniel, now I see that every pain, every difficulty, prepared me for something greater. I'm no longer that nurse who just followed the routine. Now, I carry a silent mission to be a light for those who wander in darkness. Daniel, with his serene look, nodded, as if confirming every word I said. What you experienced is rare, Celestine. Your recovery is a sign that there is a greater transformation happening within you. Use this experience to inspire others, but never forget to also take care of your own soul. He advised, with the firmness of someone who has already known the paths of the spiritual. And so, day after day, I incorporated this new essence. I began to pray fervently, no longer out of obligation, but out of gratitude. Those prayers, which were once mere rituals, became sincere dialogues with the divine. Even my thoughts sometimes returned to the attackers, now seen with compassion, understanding that they too were immersed in an inner darkness. Over time, my transformation became visible to everyone. In the eyes of each colleague, in the tone of voice of each patient, I found the certainty that the experience was not in vain. I have become a living testimony that even in the face of the deepest horrors, life can be reborn with renewed strength and light. Each new day reminded me that I was now part of a bigger story, marked by a new beginning that would never be erased. As the fog of my rebirth began to lift, I was overcome by a series of teachings that proved to be the foundations of my new existence. Amid the calm that followed the whirlwind of visions and experiences, I realized that every word Jesus spoke, every divine instruction, was an invitation to live with renewed discernment. In the days following my return, I dedicated myself to meditating deeply on those messages. In long hours of silent prayer, sitting in a quiet corner of the small chapel at Midtown Hospital, I relived in my mind the words that had echoed in the spiritual dimension. An inner voice, soft and firm, reminded me, Celestine, the true battle is not only fought outside, but also within the heart. Stand firm in the truth and do not be deceived by the seductive appearances of this world. These words have become my daily mantra. During breaks in the midst of the hospital routine, I remembered the moments when Jesus guided me to cultivate a deep knowledge of the Bible and to develop a prayer life that transcended mere ritual. Daniel Marshall, always there to offer his wisdom, used to tell me, Celestine, spiritual discernment is like sharpening a sword. Only with it will you be able to see through the lies that the enemy throws around you. I replied, with a renewed shine in my eyes, and every teaching I received now becomes the blade that protects me and illuminates the path of those who are lost. In candid conversations with Michael Lawson and even Evelyn Parker, I realized that my transformation was visible. It was not just the miraculous recovery of the body, but the renewal of a soul that, previously dormant, now burned with fervor. I began to face each challenge with resolute calm, aware that each obstacle was an opportunity to apply the discernment that I had been taught so much. The crucial teachings I received also showed me that deception would be the enemy's most powerful weapon. I clearly remembered the apocalyptic visions and images of a world where the truth was hidden behind shiny but empty facades. With that, the urgency arose in me to be a living testimony, a beacon of hope for those who still walked in darkness. One winter afternoon, while talking to Rachel Monroe, a resilient survivor, she said, Celestine, your experience inspires me. You seem to carry a light that doesn't go out, even in the face of life's storms. Rachel, I learned that this light comes from the deep understanding that true faith is not shaken by fear or manipulation. It is strengthened by truth and discernment, I replied, feeling a responsibility to spread this message. The conclusion of this journey is not just the report of an extraordinary event, but the call to live each day with purpose. Jesus made it clear to me that, despite adversity and the deception that lurks around every corner, true victory lies in cultivating sincerity, humility, and unconditional love. Today, as I follow my routine with the same simplicity as before, I carry within me the certainty that each challenge is a chance to reaffirm my faith and illuminate the path of those who seek the truth. This is the essence of the teachings I received and the legacy I now embrace, living intensely, with discernment and compassion, as a silent testimony to the transformative power of faith.